All right, this is Abby Gooch with the Intuition Summit and Emmy Vadnais, my co-host. And I am so excited to introduce our really fabulous guest. Her name is Robyn McKay. And this woman, she flashed on Facebook and I'm like, what does she do? And she does something called spiritual intelligence. So from what I've studied of the brain with NLP and what I've really lived in my experience with intuition, I'm like, I don't know why I'm getting like genetic codes, like just there's some powerful stuff that's going to come through this interview that I just knew she was supposed to be here. I trust her. I already know her at some soul level, but this is literally the first time we've ever met. So welcome, Robyn. We're so glad you're here. And as you say, it's kind of like the council gathers. Here we are.
The council has gathered. And although we are only just now meeting in person, I know that we have been doing this for lifetimes probably. So I'm so happy to be here with all of you.
Thing. It's weird. I get chills. It's like we're here to bring this in.
Did you know, I just learned this the other day on my podcast. It's called Becoming the Channel. I just hosted one of my dear friends, Andrea Donnelly, who speaks light language, which is fascinating. You'll have to listen to that episode. But she told me the etymology of the word weird. Do you know what it is? It means destiny. Weird means destiny. So your weird is your destiny.
That's awesome. Well, Dan and I call each other weird, so I guess we're right on path.
Perfect. And I think witch actually means wisdom.
Of course. Wow. It's all been twisted, and we are untwisting these things so that we can get back to our original coding and our original supernatural abilities. And I know this is part of the work that you all are doing as well.
Agreed. Intuition is key to access that supernatural.
Yes.
If you want to call it power, I mean, I just feel it's our innate intelligence, but the truth is it holds a lot of power because we're infinite beings. So Robyn, I'd love for you to like expand on how you started this. Why do I keep getting genetic coding? What on the earth is coming through with that?
I love this. Do you want to know something? So I've been a STEM girl since I was, well, let me back up a second. So when I was a little girl, like 6 years old, I knew I was going to become a doctor and write books. And I laid down on my tummy with my notepad and my pencil and started to write my book. And then I realized very quickly I didn't know all my letters yet, and I didn't know what to say. And I was very upset I had my first existential crisis, I think, right then. And then I was also a STEM girl. I had my first microscope when I was 10 years old, and I was so disappointed in the light source. It was a mirror. And I was just appalled by this, even though it was like the 80s and like they didn't have really high powered microscopes that were widely available until I did my undergrad in biology. I went to work in biotech, and I actually got to work with high powered microscopes. So that fulfilled that deep seated need in my science brain to do so. Interestingly, though, in 7th grade, my very first science fair project was on genetics. And so I've been working in that area for a long, long time, just kind of now behind the scenes, obviously, because now I've got my PhD in psychology and I went a different direction in terms of the research that I do. But the genetics has always been a big piece of something that I've been fascinated by and interested in from the time I was old enough to know about DNA and all the things that are aligned with that. So that's kind of a nugget that I haven't shared before, that those early science fair days were all about genetics. Do you have a straight thumb or do you have a curved thumb? That's a genetic phenotypic characteristic. Are your ears lobed or not? They were very simple things, but it was like the initiation into my scientific research on really interesting phenomenon that continues until this day.
Yeah, like going into the soul imprint.
Yes, in some ways.
It's amazing. I'll tell you why I got that, because Emmy knows we have a program called the Intuitive Child. So you, as an intuitive child, already knew what you were going to do. And so that's a big part of it, is the intuition knows. So as we're supporting the children of our world to open up to their supernatural gifts, of course I'd get genetic code. Tell us about yours.
Of course, yes. And now these days with the rainbow children coming in, my goodness, they're just a different make and model of consciousness, and it's really special. One of my clients actually is a speech and language pathologist by training. She communicates with the people who can't speak yet, the babies who are coming in. So she tunes in and can translate their frequencies to their parents, so their parents know how to communicate with them and what their requirements are to thrive. And isn't that wonderful that our supernatural abilities are actually helping this next generation of children who are coming in as well?
Yeah, I know. I do that with friends' babies and also the babies I feel coming through for
Yes.
myself. And it's like you can talk
Yes.
to them, and then you meet the babies and they like love you, of course, because they
Yes,
already
of
know.
course they do. They
But
already know you.
uh,
And I'm so glad to know that you do that as well. That's so important because um as you know, adults, we sometimes, I don't want to say block our intuition, but sometimes we can, or we still think that it's weird, and weird not in a good way, or we want to be in the closet and don't want to tell anybody why we know the things we do and so on. And that was a little bit early on my experience, but I was always an intuitive kid. I would know like when my teacher was going to have a pop quiz in math class, so I'd just stay in at recess and study, and then I'd get an A on it. Or one time in high school, I had a whole essay download into, like, literally I'm walking down to the office where I was supposed to write this essay for a scholarship. The whole essay just downloaded. As I'm on my way to the office, I
yeah,
write it and I win the scholarship.
yeah, I had the
I
same
didn't have words for that.
thing.
What even is that? Well,
Yeah.
now I know I'm a channel. I'm an intuitive channel, and that's one of my supernatural abilities. But back then,
Yeah.
how do
Yeah.
you explain that? You can't, so you just don't talk about it.
Yeah. I had a similar experience. I think you just be it. Yeah. I mean, I wrote an essay and got a scholarship too. And it was like, it just went through me. So it's like, I
Yes,
think
you channeled it. I didn't beat it. It's
yeah.
not a competition, but yes, I just want to affirm that I just actually made a Facebook post today about how the capacity to enter into flow consciousness. Remember, you lose track of time, you become completely absorbed and engaged in the activity. It just seems to flow through you. That is a marker of somebody who is a channel, who is an intuitive channel. We don't label it like that up to this point. We say, oh, it just came to me, or, oh, I was just sitting up and then like all of a sudden I just had this idea and it was a download or whatever. But it really is a marker of somebody's ability to channel, not just essays for college scholarships, but also very high frequency information and transmissions that are meant to be coming in to our planet right now from benevolent beings who are working very diligently on our behalf to, as we were talking about, I think before we started recording, bring heaven to earth.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. And everybody has this ability, talking
Not
about like,
really. I'm going to disagree with you there. This is going to be controversial. Can I do that?
you can do whatever you want to do.
Well, this is a bee that I have in my bonnet, and Abby, I don't mean to do anything other than to just give a different perspective, because that is something that we often hear when we're talking about intuition, is that everybody is intuitive. And yes, I would agree with that to a degree. But when we look at personality, this is one of the things that I've been able to do with my PhD in psychology, is to really study the personality profiles of intuitives and spiritually intelligent people. And it turns out the personality profile that I use is called the NEO 5-factor personality assessment. This is the assessment that's considered the gold standard for personality psychologists. We've used it for, I'm going to say, probably now 60 or 70 years. There's that much data across the globe and around the world of people who have taken this assessment. And there are 5 major factors of personality: openness to experiences, extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and neuroticism. And what we have found with the intuitives is that there is a small subset of the population. Remember the bell-shaped curve from undergrad or wherever, where you were graded on that. Most people have about an average ability when it comes to something like intuition. There are some people who are on the tail of the curve, who are in about we'll say the 90th percentile and above, who are going to have intuition as a supernatural ability. So, and then there are some people on the other tail of the curve who are going to have very little access to their intuition, actually. So we have to look at intuition, just like we would look at any other personality characteristic, as something that exists on a normal distribution curve. Yeah, most people do have access to intuition for sure. But because I work with highly intuitive people, one of the things I know about us, and I think that for you too, it'll be important because I know you're both highly intuitive. When we say everybody's intuitive, or everybody's smart. What happens when we change that to everybody's a really good basketball player? Is that true?
No, I think that the spirit of what maybe, I don't know, I can't speak for you, Abby, but I think maybe you were going in is that we all are born with intuition, but like you say, on that bell curve, not everybody has access to it, or has
yes.
a personality, or maybe
Yes.
maybe even a
yes.
soul karmic plan to maybe get in touch with that as much
Yes.
as those of us who are highly intuitive.
Yes. And Abby, I didn't say that. And I'm sometimes my clients call me the velvet hammer, and I say things that are like,
I like it. I'm like,
so, okay, good.
I love it. I don't, it's fun for me to have the conversation, and Emmy like speaks so well for me because she just smooths everything. Like I wasn't upset by it at all. I guess I feel like exactly what Emmy said. She totally spoke for me. We all have it. It's that our ability to tap into it, access it, practically use it. And when you do, even if it's just like this much, when you follow, even if it's just an inkling, you get amazing results and have fulfillment. So that's,
and we also have to remember that the people who are listening to you are intuitive. They wouldn't be drawn to this information and the summit if they did not think that they had intuition. Does this make sense? So there are people who
curious about
curious about it. They're intuitive curious, for example, but they're conscious. Maybe that's a different way to put it. But statistically, what we look at, and I can't help but bring in statistics because that's just how my brain works. We have to just acknowledge that those of you in our audience, including you two, who do have pretty profound intuition, I just want to honor that. And because what happens, especially I think for people who are women, from the, if you're socialized as a little girl, you get taught certain things about how to be in the world, sit down, be quiet, be a good girl, whatever it is, put other people first, those kinds of things, be polite, be nice, all of those things. And what ends up happening, I have found in all of the research that I've done on gifted and talented girls and women across my career, as well as on the intuitive ones, is that we can kind of put those gifts that we have kind of in a place of everybody has it. So what makes me unique? What makes me special? Not in an egoic way, but in a true, like, what is the truth of my sacred purpose or my sacred calling? And so part of my mission in coming in and talking about spiritual intelligence and intuition is really to emphasize that there are unique features to each of us, that we have I'm going to say a duty, but I don't mean that in like an arduous, like army crawl kind of way, but more like it's a sacred duty to express and to contribute from the perspective of those gifts, including intuition. Does that make sense?
It does. Oh my God. So can I just share two things, beautiful
yes.
lady? I promise I'll like pause for a minute. So I remember probably it was after we have a nonprofit called One Heart Global where we go help kids. And I think we came back from either Thailand or Bali. I was sitting at dinner with my business manager, and I love Cosmos. They're like my favorite. So I had one, and then I hear clairaudient, as clear as day, don't have another one. And I turned to him and I'm like, Sai, I just heard not to have another drink. Don't you hear that? And he's like, no, Abby, not everybody hears that.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh, you sure? And he's like, yeah.
Yes.
So I want to mention this because I wasn't even aware. It's just my day-to-day life. I see energy like I see my hand. So I'm like, and even in my current partnership, it's like the same. Don't you know? We can't go down that street. He's like, you drive me nuts. I'm like, oh, it's just
well, duh. And when you're with other intuitives, of course. My friend Elise and I were just at a retreat together up in Sedona. It was called the Become the Vortex retreat. And it was potent. Like everything is different after it. But we were in two different locations, and I had sent a telepathic message to her about, could you bring my sweatshirt? Yeah. And then I called her, and I said, I'm calling you. And she said, I know, I already heard you. Like, you didn't have to call me. Duh. Of course I heard you. So when you're with other intuitives, it's like, it becomes as natural as could be. When you're with your intuitive peers or with the people who also have these gifts, it's like, duh. But for most people, it's kind of like, ooh, what is that? And
Yeah.
sometimes it's because they're just not able to turn them on or not wanting to turn them on. There can be a myriad of reasons why that is. I love that. Yes,
Yeah.
not everybody is clairaudient, for sure.
Yeah. And so but at the other point of that was to be able to speak to people who aren't as intuitive. So I've had to pause and be like, wait, like in my partnership, wait, you may not understand me because I'm seeing and experiencing so much more in that capacity than you are. And he'll be like, dude, it's too much. Like, I don't get it. And he's beautiful. He's intuitive
Yes.
too, but he can't get it because he's not operating from that same place. It
Yes.
doesn't make him less of a person. It's just
Of course not.
he cannot relate. So then I'll like Emmy, she's like, hey, I was thinking of calling you, but she felt exactly what I was doing. It was exactly what you said with your friend. I don't know what it was. What was it? Em? Like, I was thinking of calling you, but I didn't want to bother you. So like
we knew, yeah, we could check into each other on how we were feeling and if we're the other person is receptive to be contacted or not.
Yes. Yeah. That's a form of telepathy that,
Yeah.
we work in this etheric field. That's the connection that the ether is what binds us all. And so Einstein referred to it once as spooky action at a distance, but the etheric actually explains it. It just is, we're all connected. And when your telepathy is online, especially with people who you love and who are connected with you, it's so easy. My whole family can have telepathic conversations. And then, somebody will say something that would seem like a non sequitur aloud, and everybody knows what they're talking about because it's been going on in the etheric.
Why do you think that is, that some people are more innately talented at it, Robyn, versus some people who it's just sort of like they're, it's maybe sometimes they get little insights in a dream or they get little flashes, but they want to harness it. It's sort of, I kind of equate it to, I'm married to a chef. So it's kind of like maybe somebody who is somebody like him, who's won a James Beard Award and he's just off the charts in his culinary skills. I really call him a food artist because he not only makes it taste incredible and healthy, but also it looks gorgeous. But then there are those who, we all need to eat, or most people do, and people want to cook, but not everybody's going to achieve that level of culinary talent and ability.
Not everybody is going to win the James Beard, for sure. Yes. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, we have to look at, first of all, intelligence. And when I talk about intelligence, which is what I studied in grad school at the University of Kansas, I actually co-wrote a book with Barb Kerr called Smart Girls in the 21st Century, which won an award for the psychology of gifted and talented girls and women. That's almost 10 years old. I can't believe it. But when we look at intelligence, what we have to understand that intelligence, just on a very basic level, is processing speed. How quickly can you figure things out, make sense of things, and know what to do about them? So that's just very general intelligence. Processing speed runs on a normal distribution curve. Some people have super fast processors in their brains, and it actually happens to be related to how much myelin there is in the nervous system. Myelin is, of course, the insulation that carries the electric impulses. So the more myelin you have, the faster the impulses go through the system. And that, like, you can tell somebody who's very, very bright, and you can usually, pretty bright people can tell who's smarter than they are, even who's faster than they are. Just like if you're a track athlete, if you get on a track with somebody, you can tell who's faster than you are, or who's a better chef than you are, or whatever. So we have to look at intelligence, first of all, and then we have to look at one of those personality factors that I described a little bit earlier. We have to look at openness to experiences. Now, openness to experiences as a personality factor is the most heritable of all of the personality factors. And it is something that we have found has been, you're born with it, basically. And it's kind of binary. You're either born with your eyes wide open, looking around, you've kind of got everything turned on and you have an awareness, or you're more closed and maybe it takes a little bit longer to come online. Okay. That can also have to do with just how much myelin you have in the nervous system, even at the time of birth as well. So it's highly heritable, so genetic, and you can actually look at openness scores in people and then look at, okay, so who was most intuitive, who was most creative, mom or dad or both. And usually what we'll see throughout the generations is a trend, or is a pattern of openness, intuition, creativity. So we'll see inventors, we'll see writers, we'll see artists. And of course, the challenging thing about these abilities is that, at least in past times, you know, the message was you can't make any money doing that. So you have to do something really practical, like become an accountant or an engineer. And a lot of the expression of the openness has been muted simply because of the messages that we received starting as children about what we can actually make money doing as adults. So when we look at intuition and we look at this factor of openness, we can understand intuition from the perspective of imagination. So there are people who are highly imaginative, meaning that we can have a lot of different possibilities happening in our mind's eye. We also, if we happen to be anxious, we're going to have all the worst case scenarios flying through our minds as well. Have vivid dreams, that kind of thing. Also be clairvoyant. Abby, to come back to your point about the clairs that you were referring to earlier, we're looking at people who are highly emotionally intelligent, highly sensitive to their own emotions and to the emotions of other people. We look at openness in terms of the intuition piece with regard to the love of travel, the wanderlust, wanting to go new places, try new things, explore, a need for change. We also look at from the perspective of aesthetics. There are some people, believe it or not, and I know that neither of you are one of them because you have beautiful backgrounds. There are people in the world who can live and work in a room with white walls and no windows and be perfectly fine. But when you have a profound need for beauty in your life and to create beauty, this is an indicator probably that you've got that level of intuition that would say that you have the ability, the natural ability that's already been turned on for the clairs, especially clairaudience, clairvoyance, clairsentience, claircognizance. I could go on, but I think I'll pause here and see what's occurring to you too.
Well,
It's
I think I
true.
had a precognitive download the other day, I think just yesterday or this morning, that I had this thought of, oh, I bet people who are more intuitive also are more artistic, and people who are more artistic can be more intuitive. Because it seems like
Yes.
it's a very creative group.
Yes,
Works,
it's true.
and through these interviews, Bry Wilkinson, who we interviewed yesterday, was talking about, he makes this beautiful visual art on his Instagram. And when I looked at it, I had this aha of, wow, a lot of people who have the clairvoyance, I think, well, definitely all of you, the three of us here, are able to see pictures and images so strongly.
Yes. And so you can see, if I were to give you two the Neo personality profile, and we were to look at your openness to experiences scores, or let's say we even did the Neo for everybody, all of the speakers who have been on your summit, I would be willing to bet that the scores on openness in particular would be in about the 90th percentile and above, meaning that in a room of 100 people, and sometimes even in a room of 1,000 people, there would be a few that are more open to experiences, aka intuitive, than you are. But you're going to, in that whole group of people, be some of the most intuitive people in the room. That doesn't make us better than anybody else, by the way. It just makes us different and unique. And so we have some different and unique responsibilities and opportunities and contributions that we're meant to be making in the world from a place of beauty, creativity, innovation, and so on. Mm. That's exactly right, Emmy. Thank you for having that precognitive experience. It's a perfect observation.
Mm-hmm. It's true on the beauty thing, man. I got to have beauty everywhere I go. I freak out if it's not. And people are like, hey, can you design something for me? Just because and Emmy knows it. What is it? Astrology chart. I think it's in my chart. Like I have to, I will create home that's beautiful. Like otherwise.
Your Venus, I believe, is in your fourth house, which is also, a lot of people think fourth house is just home and family, but it's also consciousness. Yeah. And it's your inner self. And so I actually have Sun in the fourth house, but you having Venus in the fourth house, it's like your home will be beautiful.
I love that. And you probably, Abby, create beautiful sanctuaries for other people as well, I'm guessing. Yeah. So these are things that, personality is one facet of understanding us as these multifaceted, multidimensional beings who happen to be here in these little human bodies that are so precious, right? But when we look at the statistics on the highly intuitives, the ones that we're talking about here, They're
Yeah.
going
Well,
to have more of those abilities than most people are.
yeah, definitely. I mean, we've all gone into it professionally, and in a minute, I want to hear more about how you got into this more, Robyn. And I mean, you knew at a young age, and then also how you are helping people with spiritual intelligence and genetics
Yes.
and codes and all of that. But for those listening who are thinking, well, I don't think I am in that 90th percentile and I haven't made it a profession. I would, through this conversation, I'd love it if you could share suggestions you have for those folks to be able to access their intuition, because kind of going with that analogy of cooking, maybe not everybody's going to become an award-winning chef, or most people aren't actually, that they still maybe want to cook a nice meal at home.
Yes, of course. And this is where practice comes in. Practice and intentionality is so important, right? In building the muscles. Like if I decide I want to build muscle, and I decide, okay, I'm going to build muscle, but the way that I go about doing it is I'm going to do one push-up. And then, whatever, go sit on the couch and watch Netflix, whatever. Like, no, that's not how we build muscle, is it? And so too is the case with intuition. We have to educate our intuition. There's a great book. It's old now. It's by Malcolm Gladwell called Blink. Maybe you two are familiar with it, but he writes about how the intuitive ones, he's related to the expertise, and he'll say that it requires 10,000 hours. And I think that there's more to it than just, putting in the hours. There is a mastery, certainly. The more time you spend working on the craft, working on the art of intuition, I think that the more familiar you become with it. But I've always said this, like I had to take organic chemistry in undergrad. My undergrad was in biology, and I would have been a terrible organic chemist. It would not have mattered how many hours I spent in the organic chemistry lab. I mean, oh my God, like, no. So we have to also lean into what our natural abilities and strengths are, and also pay attention to the desire. Maybe I do want to prepare a beautiful meal for my family. And so how would I go about doing that? Well, practice is one thing. And then finding a really good mentor, somebody who you can look up to, be guided by, be curious about how they're living their lives as well. These are all steps you can take, or processes that you can go through in order to activate your own intuition to a place where you can feel comfortable. Not everybody has to move to Sedona and do angel card readings at the local, tarot store or whatever. Like that's not a lot of our paths. And in fact, right now, I believe on where we are on the planet is that intuition needs to be coming online in all arenas. So I was telling you before we started recording that a lot of my clients come out of tech. They're emotionally intelligent women who are engineers by training. And the emotional intelligence is one of the markers of somebody who has a native intuition. And that's something that they'll bring online. And then they can go back into their corporate work and they can understand things from a different perspective. And they can read the room in a way that maybe they weren't able to read before. And maybe they can even move the energy of the team in a different way than it would have been moved before, because they don't have to be the bossy one or be the loud one or whatever to get things done, but they can move much more in a subtle energy way and position themselves in leadership from an energetic or intuitive perspective, rather than from the good old fashioned grit, hard work, and tenacity perspective. Mm-hmm. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I just love what you're saying. I'm really glad you said what you said, because it can feel diminishing, I think, when you have intuitive gifts. Like sometimes you can feel the height of the world, like, oh, I'm super powerful, but also it's fascinating. Like I think was it interview 2 or 3, Emmy, that we had a speaker come on and I'd forgotten that I've used my hands just to heal. And I had put that part in the closet. Like I was like, no, I'm just a business coach. And she just saw it. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, I've healed people from like
yes.
And I was like, what on the earth? Like, I mean, as an intuitive, it's kind of embarrassing to admit, but like, I'm like, now I understand how people feel. So the reason I'm saying this is to lean in to our intuition instead of being afraid of it. Because even if
please.
Like, you were talking about the emotion, and it's like, I can, try to numb out sometimes when I feel such intense emotion, but it's like, no, actually, like our other speakers have been sharing, lean into that. What is it telling you? So just to encourage people, like, if maybe you do feel anxious, lean into it. And what is your intuition telling you about that? Just a little ever so slight crack in the door can open this like whole new world for you. And to me, I've always seen life as beautiful. Like my best friend growing up, she's like, Abby, you think everybody's beautiful. And I'm like, you're right, because I would see from the
Yes.
heart,
You
right?
see their highest potential. That's actually one of the most disappointing aspects, I think, of being intuitive, is that we can see people from their highest potential and often they don't live up to it. And it's
Well,
like, what's even happening?
I just have to tell you, my particular thing, it wasn't that. I saw from the heart, Robyn, and that
Yes.
was beautiful. So I wasn't
Mm,
I can see that for people, but as a
sure. But you
kid
saw
in
their,
high
yes.
school, it was their heart. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
so good.
when you listen and you see from that place, the world becomes so beautiful. And
Oh, I
that's
love that.
there, you know,
I
it's
love that sweetness. You're so sweet. And people are so fortunate to have you in their lives, because you just add this sweetness to everything that you touch, like even energetically touch. It's like you look at something and it becomes sweeter like honey. And, I do think, well, let me stop there, because I feel like that we just shifted
well,
frequency for
it
some
was
reason.
just really, we did shift frequency.
Yeah.
Like my partner's like, everything you touch becomes beautiful. And so I just want to reiterate, everybody, when you're from your heart and you see that
Mhm.
place, life will become beautiful. Because if I get trapped in my head or I pick up the thoughts of others, I had one coach who was like,
Yes.
turn that off because you don't want to hear all the thoughts.
Yes.
If you go to the heart, I swear to God, life becomes so beautiful. And so there's no other way. Like if there's one thing people could remember, it's put your physical eyes through your heart, because I feel like it'll save the planet. It'll bring like forgiveness in for what's happening at a global level. Also in my own personal life, for like people that have hurt me, Emmy knows about, there's just a couple of people that just kind of sideswipes me professionally. And I was like, not expecting it. And it's none of my clients. It was actually an outside organization. But it was fascinating because the only way I could heal was forgiveness through my heart.
Yes.
And I actually had to change the frequency. So
Yes.
that's what I want this conversation to be, where we're changing the frequency of ourselves and the planet with love, because that is the gateway to intuition, I believe.
I love that so much. Would you like to know why I love that so much?
Just
Please.
because you're going to back me up. So yes,
I
mean,
100% am going to back you up.
Give me the science.
I've got the science. Okay. The title of this episode is Spiritual Intelligence. Yes? All right. So are you ready?
Yeah.
Spiritual intelligence. So we have the thinking mind, we have the emotional mind. And that's, we know that it's not like straight up left brain, right brain, but we've got those two minds. But we also have a wise mind. Well, it turns out, stay with me here for a minute because this takes a minute, that there is a cluster of neurons in the heart, a ganglia, that is referred to as the heart's brain. Are you familiar with this, Emmy? You're nodding.
I am. Yes, I included it in my book as well. Yes.
Yes.
I love that you highlight it though, because a lot of people don't know this.
Yes. So the heart's brain, and you can Google this too, and it's in Emmy's book, so that's awesome. But I was reading, of course, Heart Math does such beautiful work with understanding heart coherence and so on. So the heart's brain, which I think of as the wise mind, connects in with the vagus nerves, which connect in with the medulla. And when we create this beautiful, clear channel, we actually can tune into the etheric brain, which is where all the intuition is stored. The collective intuition is stored. Okay. So, Abby, when you talk about looking through the heart, part of that is activating and being very aware of the ganglia, the heart's brain, first of all. And I don't quote the Bible often, but when I do,
Buddy,
you didn't expect that, did you?
No, I'm just like, here we go. I was raised fundamental Christian. Let's go.
Okay, let's go. Let's do it. I'm
No.
Catholic in my bones. I've been Catholic for lifetimes, I think. When I was a little girl, I read this and it just stuck with me. And not all of the Bible sticks with me for a myriad of reasons, but this part did. A letter of Paul to the Ephesians. I don't remember chapter and verse because I am Catholic. Paul says to the Ephesians, may the eyes of your heart be enlightened.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yes. And when we talk about activating the spiritual intelligence channel, which is the channel that I just described, from the ganglia of the heart up through the vagus nerves, right, to the medulla, and then out into the etheric brain, the wise mind. I mean, this is what the spiritual intelligence codes are doing for us, so that we can just have that clear and open channel to our intuition that is unclouded by our thinking mind. So when you're in your thinking mind, you're figuring things out, trying to make sense of things. And basically, and we work with people so we can see them scrolling basically in their mind, trying to figure out the answer. Where's the searching. But when you drop into this channel that we've been talking about, there's no problem.
Right.
There's wisdom.
Right. I love it. So peaceful.
And the wisdom, this is the clear the wisdom is where the solutions are. The wisdom is where the highest possible timeline is for you, for your family, for the world. That's where your vision came from as well. That's where the wisdom of love came from, yes. And unfortunately, our nervous system, as we know, has been marred by all kinds of things. Did you know? I know you guys know this probably. In the limbic system in the brain, we refer to as the lizard brain. So we've got all of these kind of distortions about what this is. The limbic system is meant to be limber, flexible, and that's what we go for when we practice meditation or heart math or whatever it is. So when we create a limber limbic system that is flexible, that doesn't have that projection of the lizard brain, that is out of control and wild and fearful and you know, get away from me and fight or flight. When we create that emotional flexibility, when we create the clear mind, which is that gut brain connection. Abby, you were eating yogurt earlier. The gut brain connection gives you clear thinking, but it's the heart brain connection that's going to bring in the wisdom, bring in the intuition. Does this make sense?
Well, it's both. Like when I teach intuition, it's heart and gut. That's the
yes. Yes. So we're missing part of it if we're only, like, I know a lot, and I care very much about the gut brain connection. So please don't misunderstand me. I'm just fascinated by this other connection, the heart brain connection, that doesn't get a lot of playtime. And in fact, I was so interested in this. I realized this is new information that I just received recently, as I've been tuning into what my guides want me to be talking about. In my marketing collateral for literally years, I've always said that I build the bridge between my clients' heads and their hearts. And I'm like, as I was getting these spiritual intelligence codes, I'm like, oh my God, like no, that's actually what I do. It's not like a metaphor. It's like literally that beautiful golden bridge between the heart and the brain. Can be the missing link, I think, sometimes. So yes, Abby, to your point of yes, the gut brain, the gut instinct, but also then the heart.
I love that. Thanks, sister. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'll always back you up with science.
No, it's so cool. So fun. And has such a great science background too. Is there anything else?
Well, yes, I am reminded of when I first started meditating and learning Qigong energy healing and then training with a spiritual intuitive, that one of the meditations we were taught was actually just to go into the heart. Imagine being inside the heart, finding the light of the heart, whether you think you're making it up or not, and then beam it, send it right up into the center of the head. And so this is something that's been taught for probably thousands of years, and it's in the Bible, and people talk about heart sight, and Abby mentioned seeing from the heart. And so now there's the research that shows that, and I'm sure you're both aware of, there's research that people were shown images. They were hooked up to all this biophysiological machines, like checking their heart rate, their oxygen levels. And then they were flashed images that were randomly selected by a computer. And what they found was that the heart seemed to know before the brain, like people were able to respond appropriately to whatever the image was. It could have been like something distressing or something erotic or something soothing or calming, and that the body responded.
Yes, I remember that research. That was such good research. And I remember that it was the heart felt it first, or the heart knew first, then the gut. And I would always say, and the brain is actually the last to know. And isn't that interesting? And yet we've been trained from the time we entered this world to put primacy on reason, on the intellect.
Yeah.
But the body, there's so much wisdom here, isn't there? It's very different than what we've been told.
I think the brain catches up.
Yeah. I love my brain. I love your brains too. I mean, we couldn't be doing this work without our brains. So please don't misunderstand me, brain. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not criticizing you. I love you. I love my brain. And I'm also aware of so many distortions that have happened, even in my own life. You were asking, you know, how I got into this work. Well, I've always been intuitive, but I was a science girl. And, you know, I went into biotech and I did my research and I looked through my high powered microscopes and I did my DNA extractions and all the things, and I burned out. And I always knew that I was supposed to do something different other than be in a lab. I appreciated it, but I knew that I was meant to do something different. And when I came online really as what I'll say is with spiritual maturity and really started taking responsibility for my gifts, that was really when I started looking at, like, what is my consciousness? What's going on with my consciousness? Why am I having these crazy dreams? Why am I able to move consciousness in the way that I am? My guides actually taught me how to do soul retrievals. I didn't have to go anywhere and learn that. They just laid me down on the couch and they said, this is what you do to feel better. And then they taught me how to do basically timeline regressions for myself, to go pull aspects of myself that had been frozen in time from trauma or from lostness or whatever, and bring it back into my current experience so that I had access to that consciousness. And then I probably would have been actually fine just doing that and to start working in that capacity. But then I decided I should probably get a PhD because that seemed to be the thing to do. So I did that, and I'm grateful that I did that. It's opened so many doors for me to have the credibility of the research and the credentials that I have. But it's also been a inhibitor in some ways, because I've also been super conscientious about what will my colleagues think of me if I come out and say that I am a clear channel for consciousness. And BTW, I'm also an award-winning psychologist. Like, how does that? And I've reached a point in my career. Listen, there's this, one of my clients calls it the sacred urgency. There is a sacred urgency right now. And I'm just at a point where I'm both. And as I've said, it is possible to be professionally esteemed and spiritually intelligent. And we are all examples of that, actually. So there's no more need to hide in the closet about intuition. It is very important for those of us who are to come out and to normalize it. Because the last thing that we need is to agree with the people who say that we are too woo or too weird or too much or whatever for our own good or for theirs.
Love it.
Well said. How would you describe what spiritual intelligence is? I mean, I know we've basically, our conversation has been that,
I know.
but because you're very well
back
spoken.
in. Yeah, we'll reel it back in a little bit. So spiritual intelligence, there are two basic components to it. And I believe that there's a third that's coming forward, but I'm still working through that. So I'm going to give you the first two, and then you'll just have to stay tuned. You can listen to the podcast and see if I finally land on the third one. So the capacity to alter your consciousness in the service of yourself or another person. That is the kind of the basic. If you can do that, that is a marker of spiritual intelligence. What does that mean, to alter your consciousness? Being able to shift into a place, Abby, like you, if you're reading energy, you're constantly probably in alpha state of consciousness, if not a deeper alpha brain state, or a deeper state of consciousness in order to be able to do that, right? But to be able to shift your consciousness out of the beta waking thinking mind and into that creative, intuitive space in the mind, the wise heart, basically, to be able to see the world from that perspective requires a shift, an alteration in consciousness. So that's the first piece. The second piece is the capacity to use energetic and spiritual tools and practices to bring about real world transformation. So these are not parlor tricks I'm talking about, like pick a card and let's see what the tarot says. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Those things are fun and they are engaging in the intuition, but legitimately being able to move energy using these tools and practices in order to bring about real world transformation, find new jobs, call in new clients. I saw somebody text me, one of my clients is on a job search. And one of my gifts is to be able to really focus in on, there is a perfect position for you. It has to be there because you're desiring it. And so let's anchor into that. And she just texted me that she's got an interview with the company that she has been dying to work for. So we know that these things are working because we track the results. You have to collect the data on your intuition. Otherwise it's ephemeral. It goes away and you forget about it. But when you're collecting the data on the results that you're receiving, that your clients are receiving as a result of being tapped into your intuition, this is the real world transformation that the intuition is contributing to. Mm. Or the spiritual intelligence is another word for that.
It's practical. It's
yes,
action and evidence. But I just want to give that practical evidence is it's 100% true, because when I shifted my consciousness into the heart, and I actually studied with Sonia Choquette, and she actually, yeah.
She's my first spiritual teacher. I worked with her for 7 years. That was where I did all this spirit. I love that. That's our connection. So that's how we knew.
Yeah.
Yes.
She worked my Miracle of You program. She brought me on her stage. She was like, I was freaked out. She's like, just be on stage and wait till you're done being afraid. And I was like, ah. Anyway, so finally,
I love that.
Yeah, but there was a point that I had to, okay, so the nonprofit One Heart Global,
yeah.
It was about helping people. So my business expanded. So when you said service opens the door to your intuition, not only did I have that as a kid and with Sonia, but then also when my heart opened to serving more, your intuition just heightens beyond, because we all are one. So that is, it's just huge. I can't even tell you, I'll lead international retreats with amazing clients, I think, because I'm helping the kids, right?
Yes.
I feel like the universe supports that. And then what was your second point? Because I just love giving real evidence for that it actually does work. So service was the first part. What was the second part that you said?
In the service of, so the first is to alter your consciousness in the service of somebody else or yourself. The second is using spiritual and energetic tools and practices to bring about real world transformation.
Right. So that's why I've done business coaching for so long.
Yes.
And she I think she made $250,000 last year because it was from nothing to there, because you're shifting the energy. So you can channel that energy like a wave to create huge results. So that's why intuition really is a superpower, and it's so incredibly valuable. So I wanted to share that because for me, sometimes I need to show myself the truth.
Yes.
And when people have proof, look in your own life, where have you been following your intuition and you're like, I did it, and have a little journal or whatever it is that you need to show yourself that it's real. Because I think teaching money, part of it was it's grounded in reality, but you could also do that for health and relationships. But I'm just saying, make it real, so you can touch it and feel it.
Yes.
And,
I love that you worked with Sonia. She was my first spiritual teacher right after I started really waking up and taking responsibility. And I was at one of her workshops in Kansas City, literally years ago. I think this was maybe 2000, we'll say. And she gave me and the rest of the participants a little spiral notebook. Mine was green. I remember it. And she said, write it down.
Yeah.
Whenever you write it down. And I learned that from her. And that's the science girl in me is that's data collection and it's evidence. We don't do it to convince anybody of it, but just as a marker for ourselves. And it's an activator to reassure ourselves that no, this in fact is a manifestation. This in fact is something that has transpired as a result of me leaning into my intuition. Like Abby, you seeing something from me on socials and being leaning into that. Well, now it makes sense, right? If we're both activated by Sonia, however many years ago that was, it just is, those are the beautiful connections. And our Amy with our Minnesota, South Dakota connection, these are things that we get to explore and celebrate. And we don't know what happens next. We never do. But when our intuition is leading the way, rather than trailing behind, this is where the magic happens in our lives.
Absolutely.
I love it. Trust it. Trust your gut.
And your heart.
And your heart.
I
Yeah.
like what you say about writing it down, because that was what my spiritual intuitive teacher suggested that we do as well. And she helped us make our own intuitive cards where we would go into meditation, come up with images, and then use recipe cards, and basically kind of like similar to tarot, but not exactly. It's your soul cards, really, is how another way to look at it. And then work with those images to help connect you with that part of you that does know. And also, we just interviewed Machiel Clerk yesterday, all about dream guidance. And his suggestion, and many people who work with dreams say this, is to write your dreams down as soon as you wake up in the morning, because if you don't do that, it'll evaporate like the morning dew when the sun hits it.
Yes.
So in my experience doing that, not only did it give data, but it also helped anchor the experience. And then I could go back and look at it in the future to see, did that really pan out the way that I thought it might happen?
Or were there surprises along the way as well?
Sure.
Yes. Collecting data is very important for our intellect, but also just as a recording of, I think, the legacy that we're leaving as well. Otherwise, we forget about it. And we don't want to forget.
Yeah. Maybe that's why writing books are so important. Like Emmy wrote a beautiful book, like to have documents of like
Yes.
working and then to pass it down, like the lineage. I don't know, pass
Yes.
it down.
I think so. I think that, you know, the record of your existence and the contributions that you make are so essential. And for the creatives, the intuitives, the spiritually intelligent, whatever word you want that feels best to you, I think is super important to pay attention to. It can become very easy for us to overlook these native gifts that we have. Oh, I thought everybody, like Abby, you're like, I thought everybody was clairaudient. No.
It's so fun.
Right.
Or if they tapped in enough, maybe they could be, but maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't have a natural ability to become a professional.
Exactly.
And then there are those people who are going to church and praying, or praying other places, talking to God or their goddesses or angels or guides, and getting all sorts of information, and they never share it with anybody.
Yeah. And, you know, there are some people who, you know, as I said, not everybody is necessarily meant to make a business of their intuition, but it certainly makes life a whole lot easier. Makes life a whole lot easier when you're living from the truth of your consciousness.
And even if you don't become a professional intuitive like we all have, that it could enhance your own natural gifts, your ability to align with your soul's purpose, so that you can have more joy and better health in life.
Yes, for sure.
I love it. Trust your intuition, baby.
100%. Well, that's the thing, though, is that we don't always trust the intuition, right? And so the data collection, the keeping the notes, that actually it builds the trust muscle. And also, my dad taught me this a long time ago. He always said, make your decision the right decision. So whatever your intuition is, one of the things that you can do to help yourself out a lot is don't second guess yourself, just go with it. And when you do that, you drop into the field of synchronicity, and then the next thing shows up and the next thing after that. And it's a dance rather than I have to know all 17 steps to get from A to my goal. Just step and then see what happens. And then you choose and you move, but you always make your decision the right decision. Because if you're second guessing yourself, that's going to toggle you out of the intuition and back into the thinking mind, that while we value the thinking mind, often creates alternative scenarios and timelines that can create confusion and chaos. And we want to mitigate that as much as possible.
Fear and doubt can block
it. Yes.
But I think to go into the heart and the gut, for me, every time I do that, there's this calm. And I feel like true intuitive decisions are calm. Like you're right, Emmy, like there might be some like fear or doubt present, but the underlying certainty, there's like a peace, you know, or like all is well, and you can trust yourself. And I love what you said, you know, with your I say go with your first thing. It's the same thing you're saying. It's like your way is the right way. It's like because it's coming through you too. You know, that's the other thing.
Right. When you stand in your personal authority or your personal sovereignty and trust yourself rather than looking externally for approval or for direction from other people. I had a client during the pandemic. She's an award-winning healthcare provider. She had her own practice. And she came to me because her association was not giving any guidance on how to move through this pandemic in terms of safety protocols and everything. And she said to me, she said, I just want to know what to do. And I said, I'm sorry. No one's coming. You get to decide this. And I apologized in a tongue-in-cheek way, but like, this is your time. This is your moment. You get to decide this. And it turns out she actually won like an international award for what she was able to create based on following her own guidance rather than referring out, because we all get trained very young to look outside. We got to see what mom and dad want us to do, or what teacher wants us to do, or what, you know, fill in the blank wants us to do. But when we're trusting our inner authority, that's the source of the intuition, isn't it? Is the trusting the inner authority and standing in your field of sovereignty and saying, this is right for me, and I don't have to explain myself, and I don't have to apologize for it. I'm just going to be in this space of choosing and moving. And if that triggers you, you know, hopefully you'll manage that as an adult human being.
Did Sonia ever tell you the thing I decide? Was that from her that I got that? I decide, third chakra. It's like standing in your power. I decide. And I've worked with multiple clients with that. Like it's changed their lives. Just those words.
Well, then, you know, I'm wearing yellow today, of course.
I noticed that. That's why I brought it up. It's
Yes.
like, it's exactly what you're saying. Your personal sovereignty. I decide. And it's just, it shifts everything. Like one of them on a retreat did this, and it just like opened that chakra, like huge.
Yes.
And you know, so it's just pretty amazing, the power that we have when you stand in your own ability to decide.
Yes, in your own authority. And that's the trick, isn't it? It's not really a trick, but it's a decision that you make, that I'm going to, even if my intuition screws up, I'm still gonna go with it. I'm still gonna discover. I'm still gonna be curious about it. I'm not gonna judge it. I'm just gonna be like, oh, well, that was unexpected. What next? And then you tune back in and you see what's next. Oh, that was an unintended consequence. Well, let's see what happens next. But as long as you're constantly engaging it and not judging it and not criticizing yourself for it or shaming yourself for it, but just be in the space of, you know, the mindfulness practice is so important, isn't it? And Emmy, and intuition is, you know, open heart, open mind, compassion, curiosity, a beginner's mind. All of those facets of mindfulness are so important when it comes to really cultivating intuition, because if you're judging it, just like, you know, the wise child, right? If you're constantly criticizing and judging your inner child or your actual human child, it's going to create problems with the resonance with intuition. Second guess myself.
It's such a misnomer to say developing intuition, even though
it is, because you've always been, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's part of the title of my book, but it's really uncovering that part of yourself or learning to harness it better. Cultivate is also a bit of a misnomer. I mean, it's true. It's cultivating, allowing it to get stronger. And part of that is also just releasing, I think, a lot of the barriers to it, and then steeping ourselves in it. Like, I feel like I've been steeped in it, or all of us probably maybe feel this way, like marinated in it. And in that process, I think it's very important. And somebody mentioned this also in the previous episode conversation of the summit here, is that don't go and ask other people's opinions. But I will say that in my experience, I found it very beneficial to work with, we actually called it our heart group, where we would have our own intuitive impressions, or some people call them psychic or intuitive hits. And we would then, or maybe bring a situation to this group, and it was validating, that validation process, to have that outside support of knowing that, wow, they really do see it the way that I'm seeing it. And then over time, seeing those scenarios play out. Like one of my best friends, we worked our magic with intuition on helping her with real estate. She's now actually studying to become a realtor herself, but meaning when she was buying and selling houses and fixing them up and selling them, other scenarios, marriages, moves, job decisions, all of that, I've seen them play out over time. And then of course, working with so many clients over the years, and I'm sure this is, I know this is true for both of you, is that it gets validated. So I think that that's a helpful part of the process. Would you agree?
I think one of the most important things that you can have in your life are people who don't just believe in you, but who believe you. And I did learn this from Sonia. Having believing eyes that is one of the most valuable of all of the allies. Believing eyes. I believe you. Because when you are spiritually intelligent or intuitive, you're going to have perceptions that are very different from most people. You're going to see things that most people can't see, or know things that most people don't know or aren't aware of. And if you go to those people and you say, well, my spidey sense says, and if they don't believe you, then you find yourself either trying to convince them, or doubting yourself. But when you have a collective, a community, like the three of us coming together, if I say I have a spidey sense, you guys can tune in, because truth has a frequency. And you can say, I believe you. I have a dear friend, Christina the Channel. If you haven't heard of her, she's amazing. She used to be in San Diego. She's moved, but she's young. She's in her 20s, and she's one of my favorite people on the planet. And she sees things in very different ways. And I always say to her, I just believe you. I believe you. I don't see it, because she sees things very differently, but I believe her. And this is something and she believes me. And these are the gifts that we give each other, because there is wisdom in that. And the more we surround ourselves, not to isolate ourselves, but surround ourselves with people who believe us, who can feel into the truth of it without the question mark of, well, I don't, whatever. It's like, that's when really the superpowers begin to amplify. And there become ripple effects from that. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
So
Like
important.
the group collective consciousness. I just interviewed a woman named Lynn McTaggart, who's done research on group intention experiments, and has found, I think she did over 40 studies, and all but I think 4 of them had statistically significant results. And 2 of those 4 were because, I think, of faulty tech equipment or something, but she's replicated them over and over again and has best-selling books because of it. So there's definitely like you say, a frequency of when we can all be in a harmony together.
It makes a huge difference. And Abby, back to your point about just creating a beautiful world, a beautiful planet. This is the harmonics that we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that resonates as truth is when you said truth has a frequency. It does. And to me, feeling that truth within ourselves, does that resonate? Or like when somebody says something, you're like, okay, I call it the truthometer, of course. And it's like, is it the truthometer? Like, is it true? Because we all know what truth feels like. I really feel that, and so
yes, I was going to say it's true.
I know, right? Well, thank you.
Well, a lot of people say that intuition, I mean, that's something, intuition is the truth,
And we can sometimes, there are things like when we're working on a manifestation, whether it's a financial manifestation or a home or whatever it is you're working on, you can say that you desire something. You can even affirm that it's here and now. But if there's a question mark inside of you, it's not that it's not true. It's just is that you have to do the frequency check about like, what part of me is still not on board with this? What part of me is still hanging back? What part of me is afraid of the visibility or the judgment or the worry, whatever it is, fill in the blank. And those are the things that I don't know if I want to use the word block anymore, but they're definitely create a dissonance, right, with the frequency of what is true, because it could be true for you that your new car is right here or your next clients are right here, whatever it is. But if there is a dissonance between you and it, that's where the harmonics need to come into alignment, right? That's where the alignment needs to happen.
How does that alignment happen?
Well, I work in the Akashic Records, and I do a lot of alignment work in the Akashic Records. The Akashic Records are at the very basic consciousness state. But when we work in pure love and truth, the pure love and truth, or the divine love and truth, comes in and calibrates everything.
What is the word calibrate? It's funny. I use love and truth too, but calibrate meaning assesses. Can you define what you mean by calibrate?
Calibrate meaning, I would use align also. So there's an alignment process, but it's an energetic process that I don't necessarily have human words for. So when I work, like when I'm doing the spiritual intelligence codes, I'm transmitting those in the next couple of days. And when I do that, it's going to come through the harmonics of my voice, from the harmonics of my eyes, because I transmit. You use your hands a lot, so do I, but my eyes are my primary place where I transmit energy. And my guides will come in and do the calibrations on the light calibrations on the system itself, in order to clear anything that is not in alignment with, we'll say, divine perfection. I love that term. That's a term that my colleague Jennifer Longmore uses a lot in her work, is that divine perfection. And so when things are out of divine perfection, when you come back into that space, it just has to be. Does that make sense? At least on like a heart level, like not on the intellectual.
I feel it, I know it. Yes.
You feel it, but the brain is like, huh? Like, what is that? So that's the energy piece of the work, really, is that alignment. And you can get into alignment through dance, through movement, through music, through meditation. We also have, I think, a really important responsibility to really nurture the nervous system at this point. And that a lot of the times what I'm doing with people is energetically really getting the nervous system back into alignment and clearing out anything that is not in the purest love, light, and truth.
I feel it. It's like, even as we're talking, energy is clearing,
Yes.
I mean, it's how.
Yeah.
It's beyond the physical.
Yeah. My face and my eyes especially, but my whole face, if you look at my face, you can actually see a 5-point star. And the 5-point star is that's one of the gifts that my features create. There's an alignment that just being creates. And it's interesting because from the time I was a little kid, people get triggered by my face, and I never knew why that was.
Your face. I love your face. And I literally saw protection come through. I saw the star, and then I saw your blue eyes, and then I felt protection.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. Yes. And there are some people who do not like it. And I grew up thinking that I was quite unattractive, and I had, my nose was too big and my whatever, like I had all the things that a kid does. But now I understand that the geometry of my face is activating. And there are some people who do not want to be activated by the space.
I have the same thing. That's so funny.
Yes.
Somebody one day I walked into the post office, she's like, I love your face. Kind of like what I just, you're like, well, thanks.
Thank you. And then there are some people who are like, I remember a kid in middle school, Jack, I'll never forget him. Jack. I won't say his last name, but hopefully he's matured since then. But he came up to me, like, I was at a new school. I'm scared. I'm shy. He comes up to me. I'm tall. I'm skinny, right? I'm 12 years old. And he starts like really criticizing my face. Your nose is too big and you've got circles under your eyes. And I don't know what it was awful. Like, what is that? Well, in hindsight now, my facial features have been the same. So I know that was part of his reaction. And it turns out he was not a good guy at all. So the bullying aside, there was also just that sort of energetic reactivity to this creation. So I've never shared that story before, so you're welcome.
Well, I just want to say love and light to you for that, and love and light to Jack, because it sounds
100%. Like Jack probably needs it a lot, so we'll just send that on over to him as well for sure.
Exactly. So this whole conversation has really probably answered the question I'm about to ask, but I still want to ask it because I feel like there might be a little bit more that you can share. You've already shared so much. Is how can people become more spiritually intelligent?
Yes. Well, first of all, we have to recognize what our own personality tells us about our spiritual intelligence. because we can use that blanket statement. But if I look at each of our personalities, our spiritual intelligence is going to be expressed in a different way because we're each unique. We each have a unique blueprint, I'll say, for how consciousness flows through us. So the more you can understand about yourself through whether I talk about personality because that's my perspective. You can also look at horoscopes. You can look at human design. You can look at all of the different ways of understanding yourself. And I'm not saying go into a rabbit hole and never come out of that, because there comes a point where it's like, that's all you're doing. And you become a perpetual student and you're never like actually contributing anything. But there is an education piece to it. So educate yourself about yourself. So know your personality. Know your flow, what your creative flow is. Where do you lose track of time, become completely absorbed and engaged in the activity, are challenged by it, and the information just seems to flow through you? Just like this conversation we've been having, I'm looking at the time and I'm like, holy smokes, like we've been channeling the whole time and it feels like no time has passed. So we have to know our creative flow, because that's a marker for the channel, for the intuitive channel, right? So we have to know that. We have to find teachers and mentors and advisors who have mastered this work. It is no longer enough to work with somebody who is a couple of steps ahead of us. People now, in where we are in the world right now, want to work with experts. They want to work with the masters. That doesn't mean that there's not a place for books. Of course there is, of course. And for, group trainings and things like that, of course. But it is important to have exemplars, people who have mastered. Just like, Abby, Sonia, I still follow her. She's like just one of those people in my life who I see what she's doing and I see what she's up to in the world. And I have others who have mastered things that I'm still like, there's always room to grow. So we have to be, I think, committed to our own evolution, I'll say. And part of the evolution is bringing intuition front and center, so that we can make the contributions that we're here to make, so that we can pursue our sacred callings. And when we're pursuing our sacred calling, you can't help but be in your intuition, because the intuition is guiding that sacred calling. And then practically, here's something that I learned recently. Treat yourself like a ceremony. You are the ceremony. So you're not doing ceremony. You're not doing a full moon ceremony, although you certainly could. Every day, as an example, I get up, I wash my face, I put my face cream on, I do my stuff, as we do, but I do it in a ceremonial way. So I'm literally thinking to myself, I am the ceremony. I am the ceremony. When I put my braid in my hair, I'm doing it in a ceremonial way. So I'm treating myself as a holy space, as a holy being, because we are. And the more we honor who we are, who we be, the easier it is for that intuition, for that consciousness to come through the channel. Does that make sense?
Beautiful.
Very much.
Yeah.
And where do you feel joy and love are connected to spiritual intelligence?
Oh my goodness. Of course. These are some of the highest frequencies that are available to us on this planet right now, joy and love, of course. Abby's like, yes.
Yeah, it's like moving my spine. I'm like, bring
yes.
Mm.
Yes. And so when we are in our spiritual intelligence, when we are connected in that channel, those are the frequencies that we're going to be channeling, the joy. And I don't mean that you have to like run around like a cheerleader joyful, although you could, but it can be a quiet joy. It can be a sense of deep-seated satisfaction. It can be, there are a lot of different variants of that, right? But here's what we know from a positive psychology perspective is that the better you feel, in other words, the higher your frequency. When you're feeling enthusiasm, when you're feeling a zest for life, when you're feeling curious, these are the frequencies that are aligned with the things that we most want to experience in the world, the successes that we want to have as humans, right? Whether it's financial or business or family, relationship, whatever, success, those all run on the frequencies of joy, elation, enthusiasm, zestfulness, and so on. But we have to manage, we have to notice how we're feeling. And when we start falling out of those, not to judge it, but just to notice it, because you can kind of feel your feeling. I read somewhere recently that literally a feeling in the brain only lasts about 90 seconds. But then if you ruminate on it, you can just keep it going, right? And sometimes we do. I do. When I'm mad about something, I'm happy to let it steep in there for a little while longer. But if we just let an emotion run its course, we can shift very quickly. So we have to train ourselves to pay attention. How am I feeling right now? And what is it that I need? What is it that I desire in order to be restored to, whether we talk about divine perfection or joy or just a sense of overall well-being? Sometimes it's to go out in the sunshine. I do that a lot these days. I'm giving my temples time in the sun, my crown time in the sun, my heart time in the sun. I am the sun, right? Soleil. I've got my Soleil shirt on today. So that's something that works for me. Maybe it's being on the earth. I've also been walking barefoot every day. I walk in the neighborhood. My dog Cooper and I walk around. He's a golden doodle. And people announce to me that I'm not wearing shoes when I'm barefoot. Like, as though I don't know. It's very fascinating. And so today I had flip-flops on, and the lady who usually announces to me that I'm not wearing shoes now announced to me that I am wearing shoes today.
Thank you for noticing.
Thank you. I wasn't aware of that. Thank you so much. It's very sweet, but it's just like this, like, these are the things that I do to stay connected, Is that helpful?
Yeah, there's science and research behind that.
Yeah, I know. I can always go back there.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, we could talk to you for hours, or I could.
Same.
Robyn, is there anything else you want to share about spiritual intelligence today?
Well, I just want to say that the spiritual intelligence codes that have been given to me, that I'm transmitting currently, are really vital for what's to come for people who are wanting to connect in with their intuition. And I say vital, I don't mean that there's pressure to receive them, but it is an invitation, because it does open up that channel that I was describing in a very powerful way that kind of clears out the nonsense around the doubt and the fear and the, do I do this or that or whatever, and really just cuts through. It's like a laser that cuts through. And so I do think that that's an important piece, whether you get activated to the spiritual intelligence codes, or you work with Abby or with Emmy on developing the intuition. There is an essentialness about working with people who are masterful at this, because we have activations and we have codes that we promise to bring you guys, like on a soul level. Like before we all incarnated here, we were wherever we were, and I made an agreement that I would activate a group of humanity around these codes. And Abby, I'm sure you did too. And Emmy, I'm sure you did too. And so it is important. This is meant to be activating, right? It's meant to invite people to lean into connecting and linking arms and being part of this movement into this new earth that we're all working to create.
Wow. As you were talking, I literally felt wings come up the side of my back. I don't know if Emmy did, but literally, like,
there was your activation, ladies.
Oh, I had another wings. That it was that, or well, we could get into debate about what deja vu was, but it was sort of like a precognition that was happening when you were talking.
Wow, I got so, wow.
So Abby, you got your wings.
Wow. It's tribe. I get the word tribe, and I am following Sonia still, and she keeps tribe. And so I think we get connected. I don't even know what to say other than thank you.
I love you guys.
Love you too.
So sweet. Oh my God. I feel so much more with you, Robyn, and I could go and we could have a whole other conversation, and I will stop myself from asking more questions.
Do you want me to share? I have something for everybody.
Yes, a gift. What is your gift?
Yes. So I created a shielding protocol
cool.
that helps protect our space. Because one of the things that we know is that as people who are intuitives and are conscious of all the things, life gets messy. And it's really important to have, remember when you're a little kid and you have the personal bubble around you, right? Just make your personal bubble. So I've created a shielding protocol that everybody can download. It's drrobynmckay.com/shield.
Robyn, do you want to share how people can get in touch with you and what kind of services you offer people to help them become more spiritually intelligent?
Well, I have the spiritual intelligence codes that are being downloaded probably prior to the airing of this episode. So those will be available. And we can put the link in the notes for that when that becomes available. So that's one of the first steps. You can also find me on Instagram, Dr.Robyn McKay. And I have my podcast, which is my very favorite place to be. It is called Becoming the Channel. And I have a community on Facebook by the same name. That's really what this work is all about, is inviting people to step into their intuition, inviting them to become clear channels so that they can become transmitters of the joy, of the abundance, of the sacred codes that are available to us on the planet at this time, to raise the frequency of the planet.
Can you share just briefly what are these codes?
They're energetic light codes. So they're not like binary codes. They're energetic light codes in the form of sacred geometry that come into your nervous system primarily, but also other systems of the body that upgrade and align the systems to accommodate these higher frequencies. If we don't do this and we try to channel frequencies, even of joy, for long periods of time, our nervous system can get blown out. But these codes actually fortify the nervous system and the physical body, and invite you to view your body and to treat your body in a very different way than you would have previously. So there's a whole fortification process to allowing these higher frequencies to come through. And once you are fortified, then those frequencies can flow through like gold, like liquid gold, like beautiful, pure, the purest water. And you can sustain them and you can transmit them out to others as well.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us for the Intuition Summit. Abby, is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
I'm just super activated by you, Robyn. Thank you so much for. Wow.
You're welcome. I love you. Go out in the sunshine.
I will. Yeah, you're amazing. Thank you so much. And thanks, Emmy, Soul Sister.
What a beautiful message for everybody. Go out into the sunshine and connect with the light. Light and love, everybody. Thank you for joining us.